Hey everybody, I'm so excited because today we've got Anne Yatco here with me, the Raiden Shogun herself. Hi, Anne.
Hi Marco. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. We're really excited because, as you know, this is a music-focused channel, but we're going to talk about Raiden Shogun and acting and the trials and tribulations and all that other stuff. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to watch together Judgement of Euthymia. I think we've both seen this at some point, but
yes,
we'll talk a little bit about the music, and then that will spill us into a Raiden Shogun conversation, and then we'll get to your community questions, and I'll do the best I can because there were many. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
Go.
In the land of the Narukami, centuries pass without change. Deep in the heart of the city stands the lofty abode of the Raiden Shogun. She looks down upon her realm at mortal joys and woes, and sees a world mired in impermanence. By mighty lightning, she rules over the transients. Trivial yearning and petty passion, they vanish like a mist, but the Shogun pursues, unfettered and unperturbed, eternity.
Only through eternity are you closest to the heavenly principles. Lightning is eternal. The world is but shadow. Fantasy can only survive with an underlying reality. Reality is the stillness buried deep beneath the illusion. This is eternity. Torn to oblivion! Waking world, you seem woven from the stuff of dreams. All shall fade away.
I mean, good stuff right there.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm biased, but that's my favorite character demo in the whole game.
I mean, it's pretty good.
Pretty freaking great.
Isn't it crazy too? Like, I think the use of the electronic stuff and like the trap beat and just this sort of dynamic, it's so interesting how it weaves so beautifully with the traditional Japanese instrumentation and stuff, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Especially like when like what is it, like 2/3 when like the beat totally drops out. It's just like so sparse and you can hear like the traditional instruments.
Yeah.
But then the beat comes in slowly. Like it's really
as
cool.
It picks up. Well, I think it's also really cool because if you think about it, because she's the Electro archon, using the electronic sort of synthesized instruments, so it's genius. And this is the typical thing with MiHoYo and the HoYo Mix team. Like they're just
so good.
I mean, it's insane. From your perspective, because ultimately you ended up playing like 4 characters, like 4 or 5 characters, right? If you think about it.
Raiden is 3. And then I've got a bunch of NPCs.
When you receive that script and you're in that room and you sort of start to extrapolate, oh, I'm playing 3 different characters. How does that feel for you as an actor? Obviously, it's excitement, but like, what does it feel like to be like, oh my God, this is like a really big deal. And it's also like actively rich in terms of acting, you know?
Totally. Yeah. It's funny because like I didn't get to play Makoto and I didn't know that I was going to do the third voice until we got to the second story quest. So like for like most of the time of me playing Raiden Shogun has been two voices.
Right.
And that was part of the like that was part of like the audition, was having to come up with 2 voices for the same character. But I really liked the idea that you could explore different sides of a person by like kind of separating them out like that.
Yeah.
For me, like as the actor, like what a really fun challenge to be able to like sink your teeth into.
Yeah.
And then as I'm like playing the two characters, especially for like Shogun, like for the puppet, like hitting the limits of like what Shogun can and can't do. Yeah. Because like while Shogun isn't like super emotional and she's not, I guess, like fully human, if you will, because she's a puppet,
Right.
she still has like autonomy and she still has opinions and feelings about stuff. Getting to like kind of poke at the edges and the corners of who that is, like in even some of the like the regular character lines that you can see like on the character screen were really, really interesting.
That's what fascinated me the most about the whole Raiden and the Inazuma arc in general, is that like, you know, you sort of, you meet her on that bridge when she's removing the vision from Toma, and there's that visceral intensity. And of course the music is also doing this intense thing there. And you know, she draws the sword out and does what, I forget what it's called. What's her like her
big move is the Muso no Hitatachi.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It was so cool. Also, the name is just so cool.
I know, right?
But like you encounter her in that world, and there really is this sense of like, whoa, what is this? And like once you discover that A and the puppet are two different characters, essentially, it's really interesting to think about how you as an actor were sort of like, you do have that box, and then you're like you said, you're pushing through and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how can I express this being emotionful, knowing that I'm a human actor who has to be providing emotion to a character that has maybe their emotions are subdued. Like, was there a thought process you went through, like like Luna's chewing her thing, and so it's like distracting my brain really bad.
Chew quieter.
Sorry. Do you feel like when you're pushing against the boundaries like that, like as an actor who's full of emotion and human, how do you pull back? Well, obviously with great direction, which we have. But like,
I was gonna say with wonderful direction, it's the hardest thing about that is not, because like you can remove emotion from any,
of course, yeah.
you make, but like all of a sudden now you're heading toward like just straight robot territory, and that was like one of the things that we kept talking about in creating her, was that she's not robotic, because even though she is a puppet, she like the Wanderer, like Scaramouche, like has emotion, has the ability to express herself fully autonomously. So how do you do that, but also honoring the fact that she is different and that she hews very like closely to her programming, if you will? Yeah.
Do you feel like A is more your speed as a person? Like, do you feel like you're bringing A pretty much, like, is that who you are? And her, like, sort of, she has this like very almost not naivete about her, but like, but she feels very warm. Is that like, do you feel like you brought a lot of yourself to that character?
More so, yeah. She's obviously like the real person, right? So like that was easier to bring like my humanity to her. What's funny about A is that, yeah, like you said, there is a naivety about her because she's so far removed from the world and has like 500 years to catch up on.
Oops.
She did it to herself. So
yeah. I think her relationship with Makoto and like that, the suffering and that grief, and this is actually one of the questions, but I'm going to bring it up because when I play through that quest, so my dad died a year ago, and went through the process of grieving and experiencing loss. I think that there are multiple different moments in Genshin that really stand out to me of being really appropriately accurate to the story of grief. And one of them being A and Makoto's dynamic and the relationship there. The other being Guizhong and Madame Ping that we just did in Lantern Right. Yeah. And then also in the cave with Xiao and the whole, I forget, with the Yaksha. What's it like for you to bring forth that sort of like emotion and that honesty that has to come through? Like, was that an interesting challenge to sort of dig in, or like, are you able to like do some Stanislavski and tap into some like past experiences, or like, you know what I mean? Like it's so difficult to honestly express grief. And I feel like you did such an exceptional job at like sort of handing that emotion on a platter, you know?
Thank you. Yeah, it's not easy. What was interesting about having to portray A's grief, especially in the second story quest, is that A is doing this while like just monologuing. She's monologue after monologue. And so my fear was that if every line was just squeezing all of the emotion out of it, you were all going to be so tired after 5 minutes. So it's about, like, from a technical standpoint, it's really about like trying to like carve out what is the arc of the scene, the arc of each monologue, of, you know, like where there are highs and lows when you're talking about like a memory that is painful to you, right? Not every memory or every second of every memory is going to hit you in the same way. Right. So being able to kind of ride that wave, and then more importantly, especially for Raiden, because even A is not as good at expressing herself as Makoto was. You have a person who's not great at being super vulnerable, finding herself doing nothing but being super vulnerable. And so for me, what's interesting is the tension between having all the emotion in there, but also trying not to express it 100%. And I think that's where some of the drama lives, within these like long passages of just the saddest thing you've ever heard.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, did my Stanislavski, did my whole like emotional recall. You know, I can draw on experiences from my life, you know, having lost family members, friends, you know, I have some of that locked within me. And then the magic sauce is that like that magical if I was this woman, this powerful woman who lost the most precious person to her and then spent 500 years trying to find a way to stop time.
Right.
What does that feel like? And what does it feel like for time to restart for her?
It's such an interesting thing because like that's what we do when we grieve, and like that's certainly what I've done in the this is my new apartment, and like I finally moved out of my family home after I took care of my dad and helped my mom out, and now like I'm back out in the world, kind of, even though I'm still close to home. There's that feeling of like, okay, you push out that trying to freeze time in holding on to that grief. Not to turn this into like a grief therapy session, but I find it really interesting from an acting perspective, because it's like, how does one tap into the quality of grief where it feels real and genuine, and also like you think of in a way, A suffers so much holding herself still to freeze that time, having lost like her essentially, and not only her best friend but also her sister, and that and then having to put up a place be put in a position of power. Yeah, you know what I mean. So it's like. It's really interesting. There's more to talk about the Scaramouche dynamic. There is a question about that. Yeah. I personally have not gotten there. So like, there's a bunch of like, it's like a Swiss cheese for me. Like I know what's going on, but I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So let's dive into some community questions, and we can probably fill the gaps in that way too.
We did want to make one point about the demo. She's like one of only two characters who kind of positions himself initially as like the villain. I think it's just her and Child.
I think so.
And even Child, like he's the villain in his portion of the Leo quest, but even then he's just like, well, you win some, you lose some. But so like it was interesting. Like it's interesting when you hear the beginning of her demo, because it's very much like ominous, and she is poised as like an adversary, and yet this is someone that you're going to be playing as. So it's really interesting how they like weave that in, and then you get to some of them. You get to like the little previews about the meat of like who she really is underneath all of that throughout the song.
Well, I think it certainly highlights her threatening nature. When I first listened to it, I was like, well, this is a person that's very fast. This is a person that's very efficient and very, very confident in their abilities to do damage and stuff. It's really interesting how. Yeah, you're right. It's like her and Child are the only two that are I guess Scaramouche,
but
not so much. It is interesting that you still hear her like raw brutality and power in that opening section. Yeah. And I think that trap beat in general, like not only does she represent Inazuma, but she also does have this like sort of authority that we never really lose musically. I feel like the archons are all really interesting dynamic, like musically as well. Like Zhongli is another prime example of like sort of this like powerhouse music. It's cool.
Yeah, his is also great. I love his.
Yeah, Rex Incognito I think is one of the like the best one, like one of the like most popular ones.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
In terms of almost every question was like, how did you play the different characters?
It's called acting.
So this is 2 questions in one. The way she managed so consistently to separate A from the Shogun and her voice lines is amazing. Despite being the same voice actor with the same general quality to her voice, there is a very clear different feel listening to A versus the Shogun. It's a bit of a broad question, but how did she pull that off? Then there's another question that's attached to this. A, how long did it take to get the inflections in each voice down? And how did you approach them? And B, how do you project such absolute authority in the Raiden Shogun's voice in particular?
Thank you. I think the in crafting the 2 voices, because that's part of the assignment in the audition is like 2 voices for 1 character, right? And so this is about like character intentions, character attitudes, taking in like the descriptions of a character and then using your imagination. Like, what does that sound like to you? You know, if you have a character who is a ruler and then they split themselves into like the part that mostly just does the ruling and then the part that's like also the real person underneath, like you can kind of guess like the person who's just doing the ruling is more authoritative, is more like to the point. Maybe they speak in like more in a more curt way versus the person underneath, you know, they have more to express of themselves. So there is just, you have more to play with and it will feel warmer just naturally because that's because of how they're expressing themselves more.
It's almost like like playing a mask. Like you have the mask, the version where you're at like the corporate dinner, and then you have the you know, you take the mask off when you're at home in your pajamas.
Totally. Yeah. And then the other part was about how do I sound commanding? I don't know. I'm just a really strong, tough lady, I guess. I don't know.
You're just bossy.
I like pretending to be very strong ladies, and that's super fun to me. So like I love being able to dig my teeth into characters like that.
No questions. Just want to get you to they want me to give you their compliments for her phenomenal voice acting. She does an incredible job voicing A, the Raiden puppet, and her sister for cutscenes, and you can still tell who's who despite being the same voice. That is crazy talent and subtlety.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's true. There were many compliments. I didn't copy all of them down, but they all said the same thing. So everyone likes you.
Aw, I'm popular.
Put that in that validation jar and stick it.
That will sustain me for a little longer.
Yeah, at least a couple weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
What first got you into voice acting, and how many takes on average do you have to do for each line of dialogue?
Oh, how many takes depends on the line. Because maybe I was really cool and I did it in 1 take, or maybe there's a word in there that I just cannot say properly. Maybe we have like different ways of approaching it. Like I do it one way, and the director has a suggestion, and then maybe we play around with it. So it just depends on the situation. I already forgot the first question.
How you got into voice acting?
I like to say that my origin story was watching The Little Mermaid and then being like, I want to do that. I've always really loved like watching like cartoons, like the Disney movies from that golden era. The golden era. How dare I say the golden era? And it's really just from like 1990 to like 1997.
I went to the movie theater to see Hercules.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, I was, to age myself, I was 6 years old when The Little Mermaid came out. So
do the math, everybody.
Yeah. Good luck.
Find out.
Good luck. And I always love performing. I have an MFA in acting. So like I've been studying the craft of acting for quite some time, and voice acting is acting, so that all falls into the same category.
I think voice acting is such a really interesting thing, especially. Was your MFA like in theater? Like, were you so you were doing like plays and things, and were you doing Shakespeare and stuff? Or
yeah, I did Shakespeare for my second year. Sure. I've learned like a whole bunch of monologues that I've long since forgotten because I can't hold anything in my brain anymore.
You don't need to anymore.
I know. Becoming like a professional voice actor has like turned my ability to memorize things just down the drain.
What do you mean? There's not a script?
I used to be able to memorize things so fast. Oh God!
I think back to when I was an opera singer, like fully, like on stage, and and just like how I used to memorize like 3 hours of op. No, of course it's a little bit easier because the music sort of guides. The melody allows for the words to kind of like fall into place. But
Totally, yeah. Same with musical theater. Mm-hmm.
yeah, but oh boy, acting is hard. Acting is hard, and I think people get confused with voice acting because they think that it's not acting.
Easy, but it's still acting, so it is still challenging.
Yeah. I saw some comments when I was doing Dvorak. They were like, he just sounds like himself. And I was like, that's fine. It's still
fine.
acting.
That's just like the voice print. That's not
the
like
voice print.
Yeah.
How did you feel or react to how the fan base has received her initially and compared to how she is now? Being part of such a massive community, what was your first reaction after getting the role? And whether you knew about this game before, well, one question at a time. It's like multiple questions.
That was like a lot of questions.
Sorry. How did you feel? How did you feel or react to the fan base initially, and how you felt they reacted compared to how they reacted?
The initial reaction, if I recall, was either people complaining about her costume not being flashy enough.
Oh, really?
Or when she was leaked, people were like, that's not flashy enough for an archon. And I was like, okay, sure. And then like when she like officially came out, like everyone was like, boob sword, boob sword. And like, it's the easiest thing to like describe to someone like who my character is. You'll see her in the game. She's the one with the boob sword. Yeah. I think I was so like, tickled pink that people were like, she's so powerful, she's so intimidating, she's so cool. It's so cool to see like such as like strong women, you know, who is apparently really hard to fight.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. She's really strong. I mean, she's such a dynamic force. And then I think it was really interesting to like play that Archon story quest, and then a few patches later you get that like the story quest. So she's so different. It's
so interesting because you don't like when you finish the Archon quest, there's still so much you don't know about her.
Right.
Because unlike Venti or Zhongli or even Nahida, you're not traveling with her. She's not your friend until after the Archon quest concludes. And so because of that, you don't really know anything about her except what Yai tells you in that info dump afterwards.
Yeah.
And so she's such a mystery, which is why I think I saw a lot of complaints about her first story quest. I liked her first story quest because look, I like the idea that you have a woman who has locked herself away for 500 years and she's got to get to know the world as it is today. That's a real story. It wasn't an actual date. It was more like a grandkid taking their grandparents out and introducing them to cars for the first time. I don't know.
When she reads those books what are these?
Oh, that was one of my favorite moments when she's reading the titles of those light novels.
What was your first reaction after getting the role?
Oh, so when I got the role, they were like, they got an email. I was like, you booked Genshin Impact. You are Raiden Shogun. And I was like, that wasn't one of the names in the characters that I auditioned for because they were all, it was all under code names.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, okay, well, I don't know who that is. Let's Google that and see if it's been in the game. Because I knew the game before I booked it. And I had actually played it for a little bit when it first came out. And then I was like, I'm not going to spend any money on this. Gonna put it away for a while.
Yeah.
Now that's changed.
That has changed.
But I Googled like Genshin Impact, Raiden Shogun, because I was like, I don't know, maybe someone's mentioned her in the game. And then like this whole article about Ball comes out, and I'm like, shoot. She's an archon. She's important. Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, yeah. Do you feel like a twinge of nervousness, or do you feel mostly elatement?
I was like excited. I was like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah. You hadn't been in the game though before, right?
No, I had not been in the game before.
Right. So it all sort of happened around the same time.
Yeah.
What sorts of inspiration did you look for when voicing the Raiden Shogun and Ei? Do you think very deliberately about the voices you gave them, or was it more like of an instinctual sort of response?
It was like a little bit of both, right? Like you were looking at your description and I think to myself, okay, what does like a ruler sound like? She doesn't seem like the kind of person who talks loudly, if that makes any sense. Like she's that like speak softly kind of like leader. That's how it felt to me. Like by just looking at the image and like reading about her little blurb in the audition sides. And then I just let my imagination do the rest.
That's like the most interesting part. Do you feel like, if you remember this, Do you ever did you feel like when you did the audition, you were like, oh yeah, this one was a good one? Or would you have like a thought process about it when you did it?
Don't remember what my initial audition sounded. It must have sounded like it probably sounded like what it ended up being, or very close to. But I don't remember like submitting it and being like, "This is the one. This is gonna be it.
I'm booking this.
And this is gonna take me to the top."
Well, it's funny because sometimes you'll do an audition you feel so confident about, and you absolutely don't book it. You know what I mean?
All the time. 2/3 of the things I audition for that I think, this is a great audition, I'm never gonna hear from them again.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that Raiden Shogun deserves forgiveness for what happened during the Inazuma storyline?
Okay.
Like all of it?
It is complicated. It's I don't think she's begun to look for forgiveness. She's almost there. She's almost to the point where she would start asking for forgiveness. She's really just coming to a point where she's starting to understand the severity of the consequences of her actions. Right? Because like at the end of her story quest 2, after seeing like the apparitions of like the tea maker and the soldiers, I think she like got the sense of like her impact is to her people, but that was like people from 500 years ago. Right? That's not even her really necessarily dealing with her impact to people in the present day. Now, if she's ready to ask for forgiveness, will she get it? This is a thing I this is like a nitpick I have with fandom, is that a lot of times people will take these characters and situations. This is a made up country with a made up like power structure and religion and like social everything, like made up customs, made up morality system even. It's hard for anyone to judge these characters on a system using our real life like, moral code. It's nuanced, and it's nuanced because it's different, and it is completely foreign. And I think it's fascinating in that way. Now, if she were real and she was like the ruler of a nation that did all that kind of stuff, and if she asked for forgiveness, should she get it? Probably not. No. Will she? If Raiden Shogun comes to a place where she's ready to ask her people for forgiveness in this game with that knowledge, like, will she get it? She might. She probably will. Because like even after the Archon quest is over, you still see people like the dialogues, you know, in like Inazuma City don't change. Like people are still like, they worship Raiden Shogun. She is their ultimate ruler, and she is their god.
That's a good point. I mean, it's not
going to be a very popular point with people, but like you gotta go with the material, like where it's trying to be.
Yeah.
It's hard to pull it back to our reality, because that's imposing a whole like system of like beliefs and like mechanics that doesn't exist inside the game.
It's hard, right? Because like when you make a character and like you create a character, at the end of the day, like that character goes off and it enters into the world, and that character in a way is yours, but it's also everybody's. And so like the fandom will spin it and stuff. And it's such a complicated question, because does A have personal accountability? Does she, she hasn't asked for forgiveness.
I don't know. I think she recognizes that the Vision Hunt decree was flawed.
Yeah.
You know, and she recognizes that her pursuit of eternity and her definition of it was flawed. She was wrong. Makoto was right. And she accepts that responsibility, but does she accept responsibility for all the fallout of that? Maybe not yet, because I don't know that she understands that just yet.
Well, and you have to think too, like her emotional maturity must not be very advanced, considering she was like alone for 500 years.
For 500 years. And then also she is their god. So like, also like, does she need their forgiveness? You might argue maybe not. Does that jive with like modern morality? Probably not. Like she probably should be asking for forgiveness, but I don't know. I mean, it's like I made a joke about this a couple of weeks ago, but like Zhongli did bad stuff in the Archon War, man. Like,
yeah, he really did.
The Archon War was a slaughterhouse, and a lot of gods and powerful beings alike have a lot to perhaps atone for. Zhongli's had like thousands of years to ruminate on that.
Alone. Yeah.
He's probably reckoned with himself for a lot of it, but maybe not all of it. I don't know.
He probably doesn't feel like he needs to express forgiveness to his people because that might put him in a position of weakness or whatever.
But it's like the Archon War, like a lot of stuff happened, and there's this group of really powerful people doing all this stuff to each other. But like what you don't think about is like all the people down on the ground who were just laid to waste as collateral damage. I
guess actually that's an interesting segue into like, especially about dark themes, because obviously Raiden and Ei exists in Honkai Impact 3rd. And have you experienced any of that? Like, because it's such a dark story.
I know that there is a parallel to Raiden and Ei in Honkai Impact 3rd, but I don't play the game and I have not really delved into its lore, because if I think Genshin has a lot of lore, wow, Honkai has got like buttloads. I can't hold any of that in my head.
That's impossible. But it's certainly interesting, like just how there's the parallels and how that story is one particular kind of story, and it's got that darkness, and then to see Genshin also have that sort of darkness and depth, and especially when we talk about the Archons and the Archon War and all the things that occurred, and even in Lantern Rite, like the loss of Guizhong and like that whole thing, and I think it's in Zhongli's first story quest, like how dark that gets. And, talking about that's a separate tangent, but it's really interesting just how like the layers of friendly, charming game, also bad stuff,
unspeakable trauma.
500 years of not seeing anybody and what that does to a person. Anne plays in Inazuma Chisato, without whom we'd be stuck in Rito for eternity. So big props to the young lady. My question for Anne, therefore, is: were you cast as, we already talked about this, but were you cast as Raiden first or Chisato, or was it some sort of package deal? Who was the chicken and who was the egg?
Who was the chicken and who was the egg? I mean, they said I was cast as Raiden Shogun. When I showed up, they're like, here's your script, and it has like all these characters in it. I'm like, these characters. And they're like, we're going to do some NPCs. And I was like, okay. So I actually did all the NPCs before we delved into Raiden. But before we did the NPCs, we nailed down the voice for Raiden. So that I knew this is where Raiden is and Ei. Then everyone else, I could choose voices that like were different.
For you, do you feel like that's like a pitch inflection thing, or do you feel like, or how do you establish like a voice print for a character? Because it's always you, but like, do you like pitch up or pitch down or pitch further back or pitch forward?
Yeah, all those things, right? So like, because like Raiden Shogun, she's like kind of like
a little airy, yeah,
she's airier. She's definitely got a lot of chest resonance going on, really like open in the back of my throat. And then like Chisato, she's like more forward, she's brighter. She's actually really close to Makoto. I haven't listened to both of them back to back, but they're probably very similar. But I think Chisato was even brighter, like a little livelier of a character. And and then like I have a couple of boy characters, so that's about like getting like texture in my voice. Because like I play Shota, who is the little kid at the shrine who's like, Archons, please, this is all the candy I have. And then I've got like two shopkeepers. So like the woman in Rito Island, the one who like sold the statues. That's me. And I think that Kaede sounds more like me. Like my natural like pitch. Yeah. There's an old lady there too. I have another character who's an old lady. I don't know.
So you're just all over Inazuma.
I'm just all over Inazuma.
At this point, I've also hit every region. And just in one session, I ended up hitting every region.
Nice.
But then you hear it back and you're like, oh, I could have done that. That veered towards another character. Oops. And you're just like,
it's hard. It's hard when you're doing like multiple characters like that to really truly be as spread out as possible. Like there's only so much variation you can give your voice, right? And so like even then, like if I have two boy voices, like it's just about like how are they different? Like one is more like timid and one is maybe more like a scamp,
Yeah.
So then again, like the way I voice Raiden Shogun, like it's about like how are they different? If they can't sound too different, how are they different?
Oh yeah, this is pretty interesting. How difficult or easy do you find it is to get into character, mostly especially when you consider that you're carrying conversations by yourself, like with the same character, like you're playing two different characters that are both voiced by you?
Oh, so okay. For example, in the second story quest, like there's a whole chunk where it's A and the puppet, right? We did all of the puppet. No, wait, did we do? No, we did all of A. We did the entire story quest, all of A's lines, all the way through. So I got to like experience the story through her. Then we like reset and we did all of puppet. So we did like what was that? The second half of the story quest, like puppet all the way down. Then we started over again and we did all of Makoto, and she's just at the very end, right?
Oh, well, that makes sense.
So like it wasn't me like ping ponging back and forth.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because like that would, it's not like I suppose I could potentially be okay. I could do that maybe if we had to do it that way, but we don't have to. And then it keeps it easier for you to stay like in the pocket for a character if you're just doing that, you know. And then at that point, I want to say our director Chris, he like read me in, so like he would read the line before mine, and then I would go, and then
that makes sense. I can't believe I didn't think of that. Of course.
No.
Of course you wouldn't go. I'm just here. Yes, you are.
I'm crazy, and so I talk to myself all the time. That's the real answer.
We're almost through. Let this retention be great for Anne and for me. I'm curious if she enjoys doing voice lines for A or the Shogun more.
I don't know. Like, Shogun is great because she's got all the battle lines. Like, which are great, and I love doing that stuff. A is more fun because she's just a more fun person. She has more to express. Like, she's the one. Yeah, she's the one who really has the character arc. You know, Shogun has a little bit of an arc, but that shows up at the very end of their story. But it's A throughout who is growing and changing. And her growth is not done. She's got ways to go, guys.
She's in therapy right now, so
I hope so. I really hope so.
How does she feel looking back on being part of the Archon lineup with Keith, Erica, and Kimberly currently? And is she looking forward to seeing the last 3 Archons? And would she have wanted another character looking back now if she had the ability to choose?
No, I think Erica and Keith and Kimberly are just amazing, and they are so freaking talented, and it is my pleasure to be counted among them playing the Archons in this game, and I'm really excited to see the following Archons. I think like the story promises like even more twists and turns, but as far as the second question was, would
you have played somebody else? Would you have wanted to play somebody else?
Guys, I have a lot of characters in this game. I don't think MiHoYo can give me any more. They keep bringing me back for these other NPCs too. So it's like, I think it's okay. I think it's okay if I didn't play another playable. I mean, if they wanted me to, I would do it, but they probably are like, she's fine. And that's okay. But if they want to hire me for any other games, I don't know, I'd be cool.
Someone's scrubbing through this right now.
Yeah, right? They're like, what does she mean? Is this a spoiler?
Make Marco a playable character, though.
Yeah. Dvorak Banner, when?
Dvorak Banner, when? What was the hardest line of Ace to voice?
It was probably one of those monologues from the second story quest. I think, it's just, again, like we were talking, it is, you're treading a fine line of expressing her grief and like living in it, but also not wallowing in it, because that would be a disservice to the story.
It's like when you're acting on stage, you don't always want to be like, you can't pout all night because you're gonna be like, why are you pouting so much?
Exactly. Why are we having 2 hours of pouting? It's not what I paid for.
There's no arc. Yeah. If you would carry a real life vision, what would it be and why? Mine is definitely Electro. Love your work. Keep it up.
I think mine would be Electro. I'm a Gemini, and so like I'm kind of like I'm a little mercurial.
Oh, Gemini. Yeah.
Right. So I think in that respect, Electro, I think, really fits me.
I have to be on Geo because I'm a Virgo, so instinctually I need stability, and
Okay.
No, I'm more of a cryo user. Electro is probably the best one though. Let's be real. Oh yeah, how much or maybe how far of Raiden's worldview that you personally could agree on or just relate with?
What I relate to Raiden on really is like I understand like the way like from like a very like macro view of like why she did what she did, as far as like turning away from the world and like shutting herself away.
Mhm.
Like I do that too when I'm faced with like really, really tough situations, like, you know, like that. Try to compartmentalize myself away from those things. And it takes a while for me to like really tap into like what that is and like access that vulnerability. So that I do like I identify with. Yeah. I also love sweets. So in that sense, I kin her. So yeah.
I think actually it's hilariously a good segue, because the question is, we all know Raiden can't cook, but what is your specialty dish?
Oh, if I were a character in Genshin, my specialty dish would be turon, which is a Filipino dessert. It's basically like a banana egg roll.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it's like
Turon?
turon, Turon. It's great.
Ooh,
You
okay.
can get yourself to a Filipino bakery.
My girlfriend's Filipino, so I'm about to.
I was gonna say, bug her about it. Bug her about it immediately.
The other day, her mom made pancit, and she almost got it over.
It's really good.
Filipino food. Well, that's a separate video.
We can talk about that for hours.
How much do you consume Genshin Impact content or content creation, and how do you feel about it?
Other videos and stuff.
I guess maybe
other
like
streamers?
maybe.
I some like a little bit.
Besides Marco Meatball, of course.
I was gonna say like I watch Marco Meatball.
Oh my God! Stop.
Stop. You know, like, but also like when I'm like trying to build a new character, like I'll always like Google like so and so build and like watch a couple of videos. Just be like, what's so and so? I have a few that like I'll go to. Because like they're like accessible.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like, oh.
I'm like, oh, okay.
I have to what?
It's a lot.
Well, and of course, you're also on Twitch and you're streaming pretty regularly, I'd say, right? Yeah.
At least once a week, if not twice. Yeah. So I'm doing that.
Yeah, you're producing content.
Yeah.
What was your first impression on Raiden as a character?
Okay, so like when I was in my very first session, the first thing we did for Raiden was that cutscene where she's like walking down and then she pulls the sword out.
So cool, yeah.
It wasn't like fully finished, but they played it for me because we recorded to picture for that one. And so I remembered I saw it, my jaw dropped because I was like, she is so cool. This is who I get to play. Oh my God. People are going to go crazy over her, which they did. Yeah. I also thought like she pulled the sword out and I was like, is this like a Revolutionary Girl Utena moment? What's happening? I was like, cool reference.
You were thrilled with Raiden.
Oh, very much so.
As a character. That was all the questions. That was really, really interesting. And you know, I thank you so much for taking the time out to just come on for an hour and just, I don't know, talk about this stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know how frequently you get to, but I really appreciate that you chose to come on my channel and talk about it.
No, thank you. This was a really, really fun interview. I liked that we got to talk about like the real heart of like where A comes from. I don't know, like so much of like what we talk was like, how did like, you know, like you get like the same like 12 questions, like how did you come up with the voice? And those are important questions that people want to know. But like also like I think talking about how we got to those places, it's important, you know, like for us as actors, and then for anyone who's interested in acting, and then more importantly for anyone who's just curious about how the story gets told in that way.
And I think that's like a really interesting point that you bring up, because a lot of times people be like, well, how do you get started in voiceover? Well, it's like, well, it's not just about like wanting to voice a character. It's about like, can you understand and can you allow yourself to dive into any character and look at what the situation is and what they're going through, and like sort of like have that sort of skill of deducing the in between the lines and find out, you know, you have to end up doing the doings, and how do you like decipher?
Yeah.
I mean, there are a million different things that go into being a voice actor, and a working one at that, which is a very difficult career, as we know.
Yes.
It's like not easy at all. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Like, it's hard. People be like, how do you do it? I remember this happened. I was like, don't. Don't. Well, go to this site too, but don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think it's always so interesting to me to explore the sort of meat and potatoes of like what makes, you know, these characters stick. And of course, obviously I was super, super blown away by your performance. And I loved it. I think Inazuma is my favorite region not only because of you, but just the vibes are well, they're not great there, but they are fun. They're fun to explore. You know what I mean?
It is fun to explore. It's so fun to explore a country that's actively trying to kill you.
Yeah. So thanks, Anne, and thanks everybody. Thanks for being here. Definitely check out more videos and watch this entire thing, because that would mean a lot to both of us.
Yes.
Talk to you soon, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.